Hey everybody, this is Brad Dyke saying hi. How you doing? Reason why I was making this video is I kind of got onto a little bit of a rampage, kind of enjoying myself a little bit, and that's a good thing because the goal here is to enlighten people, help people, and then I realized, geez, I just kind of stumbled on something here real quick. Let me change the aspect here real quick. So basically, I was talking to you guys in the past, and down here is a 730 multimedia, and over here is a 730DX, which is the 26 drives on it. And then up here I'm sorry, actually, that's a 7910 Tier 2. This is a 7910 straight. And I've been building these things out of server warranty manufacturing support parts. And I was explaining to you guys in the last couple of videos that I was going out there buying up surplus parts never, ever, ever, ever used. And that allowed me to be basically able to do quite a bit and design systems that have never ran before, have got brand new hardware for all intents and purposes. They sat in warehouses waiting to support in-warranty support agreements, so that manufacturers can keep their gear working out in the field. And it's amazing what you can buy in the surplus, because all they're doing is getting rid of their old equipment that they used to have on hand, and they've swapped it out for newer equipment for new warranty coverage. Now, the key thing about that is that all this stuff here you see is brand spanking new. Yeah, it was made a few years ago. That's not the point. The point is, they sat in cellophane plastic bags like this for a very long time until Sunlight had to finally realize, okay, we don't need to do warranty support for these items anymore. Let's surplus them and move on to the next greatest, coolest, neatest thing. Now, with that being said, understand that this is a 7910. Unlike the 730DX I built from scratch and the multimedia platform which I built to scratch, and I already did videos on all of that stuff. But the cool thing about this is that all of this is new. And this is really cool. Now the BIOS is so new, it's for the original BIOS. So I've got to obviously flash it and get it up to speed and all that good stuff. But considering I basically have a $12,000 piece of hardware here that I only spent $400 or $500 on to get my hands on, this is an impressive solution. And of course, here's one of my unfortunate buys that I got it, but it's kind of a lie because you don't get this kind of functional bandwidth out of 4 NVMe cards on a 16 bus, which is not a 16 bus. It's paired by 8s, so this is kind of pared down already before you could actually get the IOPS that you want to see from that. But that's okay. It's still a nice feature. And if I just took it down to one, or if I took this guy and separated them out on the separate buses on the feedback loop here, I could get kind of decent IOPS. But the only way you're going to get maximum IOPS is if you only have a single one of these in, because of the complications of pairing PCIe with multiple NVMEs because of their high performance requirements. But that's okay. It's a cool little trick, and it does work, and it's functional. Now in here you also see this guy has let me bring him out here real quick. He does not have the SSD pairing card, which I did put in my other units. And of course, because I just enjoy having USB 3.01 or 3.1, I'm going to put this little guy in as well to give me a little bit of extra oomph, if you know what I mean. Now, there is an extender header here for a media converter set, but it still runs. It just doesn't have the power to charge anything. It's just a basic USB port interface. And you can get a Molex to flip converter, and then you can use a split power output to generate that requirement that you're looking for. It can be done. It's just not something I really prefer to do. So I'm thinking maybe what I'll do is I would go to a multi-phase port, USB 3.1, instead of this assist that you see here now. But the whole point of it is this chassis is pretty much was nothing. It was just a metal housing, just like I showed you guys before, just like the unit below it. It was a metal housing. I didn't have enough complete matches for what I originally had, so I propagated some additional L brackets in here to close off the gap. So, excuse me. Anyways, it's got a standard GBIC 4-port here, which I'll change that out to that beautiful looking card right down there. As you can see, very capable, competent card. I've got a couple of those cards here I can utilize for that requirement. But I took it with the standing. And of course, I've got a 706 here. It's not as nice as the 730 series. Great little RAID card. But the cabling sets on this is set for a little bit lower bandwidth functionality. So I'll redesign that concept the way I want it. Threw in a 500 gig drive up here on the SAS side front, just for giggles and friggles, to fill in a blank mostly, to be honest with you. And of course on the front we've got a DVD drive and everything paired up. Put that guy there. And you know, I've got all the parts and everything together and put it all in place, and it powers up. It is working. So I took should I? No, I'm not. I'm getting rid of that. I'm not a fan of, NVMe wannabes. But anyways, so what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and set this up, power it up, see what we can do. Hang on a minute. Okay, one more thing before I start doing this. I realized that the air vent controller system, I forgot to order that part. It's just a piece of plastic, but as you can see here, it's an important piece of plastic because when you've got all this hardware in there, you want to make sure that you've got the airflow right, covering this. And you don't want to make that mistake. Let me put it that way. But anyways, so I borrowed this one out of my other chassis, multi-pair chassis down here, and I'll set him up later for his pairing set. But all in all, though, this is the right approach I have, and I want to make sure that keeping this cool is happening correctly. Okay, so first attempt power up is coming up, and we have our display screen. BIOS version is 1.5.5. That's definitely out of date. I think that's up to BIOS version 3.0 or better. I have to double check that to make sure. But we're going to let the whole life cycle here go forward, and I'm going to also transfer my camera to a stand so you can see what we're doing here. Stand by. Okay, so we're going to allow this to boot up. Get you a little closer to this. And we're letting it go through a full life cycle. It's going to detect a lot of things. It's going to say a lot of things. It's going to make a lot of noise. It's going to tell me, oh, I'm here. And we're ready to do things. It's going to save to memory, and it's going to apply its values in the process. We do want that to happen. And then I'll clear the logs to remove any of my tampering with the chassis, with the stack sensors, because when you initiate the power processes, stupid sensor tracks everything. But anyways, give it just a second. Okay, here we go. We're just going to let it run through, and it should get a request to say, hey, I need to boot on something. Okay, so it's going through the review process. It's going to tell us how we stand. It's giving me a little bit of a concern about the type classes for the PSUs. Okay, so we're going to do a test on the pairing sets for these units, and I see what's wrong. So just give me a second here and I can fix that real quick. All right. I'm going to reach over here and grab this real fast. So what apparently was the problem is if you look at this PSU, it says 750. And I had a paired set when I got the parts, and I realized I actually got my hands on 1100, which is nice, but I don't want to have a high power consumption ratio, so I'm going to put in the matching power supply class for this unit. And this should rectify the PSU alert failure. And because this is not a high wattage footprint. Now, if I put a lot of GPU firepower in this, then I would want the 1100 horsepower because I've got dual processors, GPUs on board, and so on and so on. And in a case like this, what you would want to use for a graphic processor is not a video card. You don't want to use a video card. You want to use something like this, which is a M Series 6000 Quattro NVIDIA card. And, it's quite capable as a card for processing and handling. It's a very high-end card. It requires a lot of firepower, too. Okay, so with that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and let it boot cycle again, which it should do, and it's going to find nothing that's bootable. That's okay. That's perfectly okay, actually. Okay, it's running through its diagnostic states. Let's see if my build is going to be good or not. So technically, with my 7910 and my two R730 chassis, I can do quite a bit with a very little amount of resource. Because if you look over here on my wall, you'll see I've got two full racks of gear here. And the whole point about these rack assemblies is different test bed environments and so on, and disk enclosures and so on. But this allows me to be able to do quite the opposite. It allows me to, if I wanted to consolidate down, I can. Now, some of my counterparts out there say, hey, I'm going from one rack to one small box and a couple of parts. And that's okay. You can do that. Okay, this is great news, by the way. We're reporting our set slot is in place. Booting HECL is inactive. IDAX is down. The PX is not functioning, which is correct. I'm going to turn that functionality off to turn the PXE off. No localized boot devices are present, and I don't want to go into anything except that to go into the setup and start restricting the environment a little bit more versus what it is now. Okay, we've got this coming back up. It's going to boot into the BIOS now. And no matter what you think you've got, you don't know where this motherboard has been. Yeah, supposedly it's brand new and all that good stuff. But you always want to go to default values. Now, so far, everything is telling me the right thing. I'm seeing The BIOS release is old. I'm seeing the state menus looking like they should. So I've got a pretty good feeling that we're doing well here on this side, but I'm still going to go through here and make sure that my device configurations, boot options, and so on are functioning correctly and are set for maximize effect. For specifics, so right here it says this is one issue right here. There is a missing value here under the value of slot disablement. You should also have the ability of a parsement state, which you can't do, and that's because of the age of this BIOS. That's okay. That's not necessarily a major problem. It's just a problem. Now, if you scroll down here on your processor stacks, you're going to see that, okay, this is a fairly basic configuration for the processor. And it's set to maximum response time, 3 gigahertz spec ratio with a 8 gigahertz bus speed. We're looking at the 2623 version 3 series. That can be improved. You can go to the version 4 if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that here because this is a 7910. And I'm not looking necessarily for a heavy load of firepower. Not yet. I'll upgrade the processors later to something a little bit more flexible and get more overall functionality of the cores. These are pretty baseline cores here. The E26, I'll write that down real quick. This is the pair I had here on hand, and that I forgot to write down the spec reference on that, so let me do that now. 2623. Okay. We'll back up here. We're going to check the memory configurations as well. Make sure that we have 64 baseline gig capacity. That's drop in the bucket, of course. One of my other ones are 64 gigs each. So we would take this up to about 164 gigs or higher, depending on the base configuration. We're not going to enable testing modes. There's no need for that. Now we're going to go to the device configurations. We will go into the iNACs themselves and disable their ability to boot with PCX. Yes. Turn that off. None. Back. Exit. Okay. Go to port 2, turn that off as well. Now if you ask the question, why am I doing this? Well, sometimes the BIOSes don't clear the NICs correctly, and so they'll carry a value that you don't necessarily want them to carry. So the advantageous is to make sure that the PXE value does change correctly per NIC, so that way you can make sure that you're handling the communication and the boot processes correctly. You can run into some problems when you don't do it in a certain format. So I've just learned a long time ago, take the time when you're baselining an environment to make sure that you can keep it nice and clean. Now, the iDRAC is a pain in the butt. I don't like the iDRAC. It's version 2.0. That's considerably out of date as well. But I do take the time to make sure that in the configurations that we are in compliance. We've got to clear the logouts. Yeah, because there's 49. They're all erroneous logouts. Those are the typical things which you see in the process. Onboard NICs are good to go. Alerts disabled. Yes, that is default. Front panel security. Brad's P7910. BTU set, Fahrenheit set, attributes good, back up. Media USB outputs are all automatic default with full functionality, correct. Lifecycle controller, I let it run till it becomes a problem, and then I'll take steps to kind of get it paired and under control. Make sure that you check your power capabilities and functionalities, that your swap over states are in place. That's important. Remember though, if you have a 750 watt power supply, you have to make sure that your system is fully rated for that. If you put in higher processor stacks, greater volumes of memory, and other I/O device cards, you might want to move up to the 1100. But I only have one 1100 at this time. So in this case, we'll set this as failover in a hot swap state because I do have two power supplies. Thermal control. This is where you can make your environment run quieter. You can spec the thermal profile so that when you're prepping it, the fans won't cycle up as much. And you can go in there and you can customize the fans if you really want to. I wouldn't. What I would do is set the profile first. Use it. 70 degrees is good. And then just listen to it. As you can see, I'm sitting here talking to you, and I'm running a small load, and this chassis is not getting hot. Now, if you do not have the plastic feeder air control footprint in there, and that's critical, because if you don't have it in there, then you're not getting proper airflow ratio, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that every chip, memory, CPU, and so on have an air restriction footprint on top of them so that heat convection can work correctly, and it affects your thermals, and your fans will run hotter if you don't have it in there. So don't make that mistake. System location, no go, don't do that. User configuration, don't do that, at least at this time. Smart card, not required, not doing the licensing requirements. Communication permissions, they're set to default. Remote enabling, disable it. Reset the configuration values to default. No, you want your values to hold as you've set them. And we'll step out of the iDRAC now. Another very important detail about the iDRAC is you want to make sure also that in the BIOS you change the NIC configuration for the iDRAC to a non-standard default IP scope. It doesn't hurt to set it to like 12.12.12.1 or something like that. It's an erroneous pathway IP-wise, so it allows you to make the platform somewhat, how would you say, inaccessible. Maybe that's the right word I want to say. So inaccessible is accurate because the key detail here is I want to make sure nobody can get through the iDRAC remote administration tools that come with Dell to try to penetrate the system. Most server chassis do have backdoors in them, and that's something we can't get around because of the United States government and all that stuff. But what we can do is we sure as heck can make it hard for them and inhibit it, because frankly, you're not doing anything wrong, but what's going on here? Why can't you just simply, be left alone as you're tinkering and playing and doing the things you're going to do? With that, let's check two other things. Correct. Serials disabled. System profile. Miscellaneous. Time frame is not correct. Apply. It is more. Yep, that is correct. No tag. Don't do an asset tag. Make sure your date and time are correct. Can set the values if you want. I wouldn't for things like F1, F2 prompts, error calls, and so on. Just leave them as they are default wise. and you do have your Dell-wise P25, P42 BIOS access enabled. I've seen problems with that and when you're doing like BIOS updates and things like that. It gets a little upset with you when you do that. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put in a hard drive. Just a generic hard drive. There you go. And I've also put on board a Mint Linux boot device. I'm going to go ahead and allow the life cycler reprocess go through. And now we'll initiate a reboot. So the 7910 Precision Rack 7910 to be exact, that's the make and model of what this particular build out was. Roughly it gets maximized at around $12,000. I maxed it out immediately by just ordering all the individual parts and pieces and so on and so on and so on. And that was really good. And that allowed me to basically get the system to be in a place where it's going to be able to host and set everything in place so that we can basically peripheralize it a little bit better. Again, that's the beauty of ordering all of these parts and pieces that you've got here. Going to the warehouses and buying this gear and then just putting it into an empty shell, it just rocks. I mean, it's just, you get everything. You don't have any of the headaches. You don't have any of the other functionals that are out there. You're able to really maximize it from the start. And that's something that's important also, is to realize that when you're buying an old piece of hardware, like I've shown in many of my videos in the past, you'll have to nickel dime parts and pieces to swap out. But the good news with that is they're usually pretty cheap. Old processors and so on and so on. Matter of fact, you can even get those very targets, specific hardware parts that you're wanting, in a way so that you can basically get into the environment and tweak out all the configurations and maximize the I/O bus and so on and so on. With this particular approach, you're basically buying all the part numbers of a chassis from the warehouse surplus. You're bringing them all in. They're all powered up for the first time. They start seeing each device. You've got a brand new piece of hardware sitting in an empty shell, and you've kind of skipped the old way of buying an old chassis and upgrading it and scaling it to get what you want. And that's not a bad deal. Let's go ahead and pull in. And we're going to boot off the Mint drive. I'll put it back down on focus. Now I have found that the Dell Precision 7910 as well as the R730 and 730DX all work really, really well with Mint Linux. And Mint is Ubuntu, basically, but with a little bit more of a caveat for what I call GUI interfacing. Yes, you still have to do some CLI, but it's limited. Plugs up really well. Excellent support. Excellent scalability. You can scale the operating system over and over and over and over. This is Mint 21. I think we're on Mint 23 now. And I just have to go to the browser state and say, hey, upgrade manager, upgrade it. It does it. You don't have to go through the CLI processes and all the downloading processes. It's graphically user interface based, and it switches you like that. It's very, very nice. And takes a lot of the mystery out of Linux, especially when you're using it for a diagnostic tool, as I'm doing now. So with the Mint boot, you also have some tier diagnostic tools that are agnostic of the operating system. In other words, they don't care about having anything loaded in the memories or anything like that. The BIOS diagnostics of the Dell platforms are pretty decent too. They do kind of gear to promote Dell. So using an agnostic diagnostic tool is more accurate and much more clearly defined. But as we can see here, our 64 gig allocation is coming up and it is working. So let me check here. Right. Excuse me. Okay, our interfaces are working correctly. And then I just turned it off. Take this out real quick. Alright, we are showing nothing. And we're testing the NIC cards now. Alright, 2 out of 4 are reporting correctly. We'll go down to port 1. See it change? Yep. Port 1 on the card is port 2 on the operating system. And we are showing reported disconnected. And we are going to port 0 on the card, which is port 1. And it came up, which is good. Okay. I do tend to use the highest port in the sequence normally, so I'll take it back to port 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and go into system. And set the LCCA. That is good. Let's see, port 4 is correct. We're doing a quick check to make sure everything is active. We'll do automatic. Pull rep. Right. Set values. Save. Security DCL. Prox. Set. IP. Right. Save. Now we have negotiation and we are live, which means I can now go here and go Dell.com. Voila, we have internet connectivity. Now, when you put systems together like this, I won't lie to you, it can be a little bit challenging. Now, the thing about this, even though this was successful, for what I've done here, here are a couple of things that are important for you to know. It's not for the faint of heart. If you don't know to get the user manual and then get the installation part ID manual of the particular piece of hardware you want, then it's difficult to identify the manufacturer ID part numbers that you need to order on eBay. So take the time, get the manuals that you need. You'll know what I'm talking about when you start looking at the installation guide manuals. They have part numbers associated to all the pieces and parts that you're trying to install into your unit. And they're unique. They're based on the HP or the Dell or the Cisco or whoever you're using for your product line. By doing it that way, you'll be able to accomplish. The second thing you might want to do is to go to some of the providers out there that do really good write-ups or good presentations on the chassis to show you things like lead cabling sets. You might have a set of cables that are unique, like this one. This is a very special header connector that goes on the motherboard and so on and so on. to give you the ability of having what we call DVD connectivity or SATA bridging or video interface cabling and so on and so on. Seeing it in a video really does help. I won't lie to you. It's a great benefit. So that's the only challenge in doing this. If you're okay with putting the parts and pieces in and putting them in the proper sequences and so on and so on, the investment is tremendous. Even if you're a business, this is a way to get your gear on the floor, fully high level operational gear. The only thing you don't have protection, which is no different than those who buy brand new hardware, is Mother Nature. Because when you are buying gear that is never been used ever and sat in a warehouse waiting to be exchanged as a warranty part for a broken piece of hardware in a warranty covered machine, tens of thousands of these devices are sitting in racks and shelves all over the world waiting to be resurplused. And it gives you the ability of being able to build your own brand new chassis. Now, the other thing that's important here is, when you look back here, you found a bunch of old stuff and you found a new way of thinking outside the box. I've had a couple people kind of come at me a little bit here and say, well, why would you do this? And, well, the answer's simple. Why not? It's that easy. Thinking outside the box. Trying to keep something from going to the trash heap and going into a landfill because we want the latest and greatest, when we find out, oh heck, we can do all types of really awesome cool things here. Why not? Have some fun with it. For those who are out there for performance and capacity and so on, who blow half their paychecks and getting that next whatever, bells and whistles. And as an example, I'll give you right here this nightmare of a card, which is a terrible attempt to, try to make people think, oh, I can put NVMe on this and rock and roll. No, you can't. It's just junk. But when somebody comes in, takes that very same card, flips it inside out, puts it back in, tries to use it in a different capacity, like a cache burster, oh, heck yeah. That card is awesome. I just completely cheated, threw these big bad boys in front of a TrueNAS header, and I had the most absolute awesome high performance caching ever. I turned a piece of junk into something smart. And like I did with my NAS discussion, I discovered I could run inside the world of a NAS my own little tiny world of VM machines, because I have all this extra bandwidth I can use internally. And I created a miniverse. I could create a binds environment. I could do all types of neat things you couldn't do before because, a NAS is a NAS. So try to think outside the box. Have some fun with it. Don't overanalyze it. You're just wasting time, hardware, and resources if you're stuck in the rut of what one particular protocol standard is, when it's very clear that this hardware can do other things if you're wanting to play with it, have some fun with it, and so on. Well, the whole reason why I do these kind of things is there are a lot of you out there who said, I don't have a lot of money, but I got this piece of hardware, and what can I do with it? Help me learn how to do that. Help me learn fiber channel. Help me understand this, understand the bus structure. How can I optimize? How can I take 3 tiny little PCs and make them into something cool because they're free to me? Then there are the others out there who say, hey man, do it this way and rock and roll and it's 10 times better. And then there are the others who say, don't waste your time. You don't know what you're doing. Leave it to the professionals. And to those individuals I'll say out there, get a life and have some fun, because you're too straightforward in my opinion. And life is tough enough. So, step back a little bit, pivot to the right, pivot to the left. Maybe you'll discover something you never knew that would be really interesting to investigate. Well, anyways, all of you have a great time. I hope you guys have a really enjoyable weekend. And this is Brad Dyke signing off. God bless and take care.